Okay, today we're going to extend on our exponent knowledge, and you are going to continue simplifying negative base exponents, but the difference today is you're going to deal with the order of operations. Your learning target, you can simplify expressions with integer-based exponents using property of operations. That means PEMDAS. So let's remember what PEMDAS is. PEMDAS tells us, if you look at the first two, PE, it says parentheses and exponents are the most important operations to do first. So underline most important. You always want to take care of parentheses and exponents, and that is the key for today. Another key for today is remembering the negative base exponent. If the negative is outside the number, you leave it outside. That looks something like this, negative a squared. So notice how it's kind of sitting next to it? That means it's outside it. This really says negative 1 times a squared. And the reason I like to expand that to negative 1 times a squared, it's because then it helps me connect PEMDAS to it. Then I realize that exponents is what I take care of first, and then I do the multiplication. If the negative is inside parentheses for the next one, so you have two situations. The negative is either outside next to the number, or the negative is inside parentheses. What you do with those, if it's inside parentheses, you look at the power of the exponent. Like this. It would look like this, negative a squared. So you're looking at whatever power this is. If the power is even, it's going to be positive. If it is an odd power, it will be negative. And the reason behind that is pairing up negatives. If I had 3 negatives, I can pair 2 of them up, and 1 would be left over, which would make the whole thing negative. Okay? So you have two situations. The negative is outside or next to the number. That's like this one, negative a squared, which is negative 1 times whatever a squared is. Or the second situation, you can have negative inside the parentheses, like this, negative a to the power. Here we have the power being 2. Since this 2 is even, then it would be a positive answer. If the power was odd, if the exponent was odd, it would be a negative answer. So that is all you need to know today. It's just going to get a little intense as we simplify through with the order of operations. So you just go step by step. When I see a number sticking to the outside of parentheses, like this first example here, I expand it out. So I write this as 4 times negative 5 plus 2 squared. That helps me know the 4 is on the outside of it. It's being multiplied, so it's less important because I need to take care of parentheses and exponents first. This turns into 4 times negative 3 squared. So what you're going to see me do today is evaluate my negative-based powers to the side, and then I bring it back into the problem. So negative 3 squared, that means that it travels along with it. Remember that from yesterday. If the negative is inside parentheses, it goes along with the power. So this is negative 3 times negative 3, which is a positive 9. So this turns into 4 times 9, which is 36. Okay, second example here. It's definitely a little on the longer side. So notice how this negative 3 squared, this looks like the first example, where the negative is next to the number. So I'm going to expand that and say negative 1 times 3 squared plus Now I'm going to evaluate inside that parenthesis as well right now. That's negative 4 squared, which turns into negative 1 times 9 plus, now I got to evaluate negative 4 squared. Since the negative is inside parentheses, it follows it along. So negative 4 squared is equal to negative 4 times negative 4, which is a positive 16. Remember order of operations. Now I'm going to deal with my multiplication. Negative 1 times 9 is negative 9 plus 16. Let me rewrite that 16. Which turns into their opposite signs, so you take their difference. 16 minus 9 is 7, and I have more positives, so it is a positive 7. Okay, so this next example, number 3, you should see that the 3 is sticking next to the parenthesis of negative 6 squared. That's a power. So I'm going to separate them. I'm going to turn this into 3 times negative 6 squared. That shows me now that I need to deal with my exponent first before I multiply because of order of operations. So negative 6 squared, it's inside parentheses, so the negative follows it. This is negative 6 times negative 6, which is a positive 36. So this turns into 3 times 36, which equals, I'm going to do some math on the side here, 36 times 3. 3 times 6 is 18, carry the 1. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1, 10. So my final answer is 108. Okay, this last example definitely gets more tricky. The reason why it gets more tricky is because you have those two negatives in the middle. This minus a negative can mess a lot of students up. But let's deal with order of operations. Order of operations tells us we need to deal with the power first. So I need to deal with my negative 2 to the 5th power first. So I'm going to deal with that on the side. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to just kind of make it a little messy here. Negative 2 to the 5th. Since it's inside parentheses, the negative is going to follow the base. So it's going to be negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 and times negative 2 for a total of 5 times. Okay, so now I can go through and multiply. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, times negative 2 is a negative 8, times negative 2 is a positive 16, positive 16 times the last negative 2 is a negative 32. So negative 2 to the 5th turns into negative 32. Now notice our trick. Our power or exponent was odd, so my answer is negative. So now I'm going to rewrite it. 4 minus, because that's the minus that was given, this negative 2 to the 5th turned into that negative 32. And when you see minus and negative, you should be thinking plus plus, which is just 4 plus 32, final answer of 36. All right, so last learning target, but let me summarize this first part here. Again, I dealt with my parentheses first, and then my exponents before I multiplied or subtracted them. When I was dealing with my exponents, I dealt with them on the side to figure out what they were. All right, last learning target aligned with this, with our negative or integer-based powers, we need to evaluate. Remember, evaluate just means plug the numbers in. So, the next example, the first one for evaluating, I have negative 6m squared, for m is negative 2. Anytime they give you a negative, you put it in parentheses. That means that it's going to be inside parentheses when you've evaluate the power. So I'm going to expand this out. This is negative 6 times negative 2 squared. Okay, so again, I put it in parentheses. Now I'm going to simplify this power here. Negative 2 squared. So negative 2 squared, it means it follows it along. Negative 2 times negative 2, which is a positive 4. So this is negative 6 times a positive 4, which is a negative 24. All right, next one. I'm working on this one next. X is negative 2, y is 3. Since x is a negative, I put parentheses there. And this is going to turn into negative 2 times negative 2 cubed. Notice it's inside parentheses, plus 4 times y, which is 3. Order of operations is to deal with my exponents first. So I'm going to figure out what negative 2 cubed is. It's inside parentheses, so that tells me it's going to travel along. So negative 2 cubed is equal to negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So I can plug that back in where negative 2 cubed was. So this is negative 2 times negative 8 plus 4 times 3 is 12. Order of operations says I can multiply the 4 and 3. Negative 2 times negative 8 is a positive 16 plus 12, which is 28. Okay, next one. We have in parentheses x plus 1 cubed, for x is negative 3. So I'm going to put the negative 3 where the x is. Inside parentheses, I have negative 3 plus 1 to the third power. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2 to the third power. Hey, I just did that right there. I'm going to borrow that work. So I know that negative 2 cubed is negative 8. And I'm going to call it good. And our last one for today, a squared plus 2a plus 4. A negative 3. So put parentheses around the negative 3 and substitute it in. So this is negative 3 squared plus 2 times negative 3 plus 4. Negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3, so that's a positive 9, plus 2 times negative 3 is a negative 6, plus 4. Okay, 9 plus a negative 6 is just 3 plus 4, which is a final answer of 7. And that's your learning target for today. So the tricky part is evaluating those negative-based exponents. Notice my strategy. I did the math on the side to determine what that value would be, and then I plugged it back into the original expression.